on the latest episode of 83 Weeks. Eric Bischoff put over the Bloodline storyline, even going so far, this is kind of shocking, as to declare that it's better than the NWO. These transcripts come to you via WrestlingNews.co. Eric Bischoff said this. This is truly some of the best storytelling and most disciplined storytelling. For the last couple of years, unfortunately, you had to listen to me babble and drone and rant on and on about disciplined, quality, structured storytelling, and I've gotten so much heat for that, especially amongst the AEW fans, because I'm quick to point out what's lacking over there. All of a sudden, we're seeing disciplined, structured, progressively compelling episodic television with great characters, and guess what? It's hot. It just proves my point. The storyline, the buildup, and everything about it has been flawless, and it's the elements and discipline that went into that story that's made it so good. If you can figure out a formula based on those elements, because every match is going to be different, every situation is going to be different, but if you got a template, if you got a formula, 7 times out of 10, which is a very specific number, you're going to hit. And one of those is going to be a Bloodline type story. I think it's been the best story that's been told in professional wrestling in 30 years or more, far better than the NWO. In terms of its structure, its discipline, and I keep using that term discipline. What does that mean? That means sticking to the plan and sticking to the story. Don't start throwing things in randomly and spontaneously because somebody had a good idea 2 hours before showtime, because that's what typically happens. They stuck to the plan and they executed it perfectly. I think the NWO was a great story, and its day was up until the Bloodline, perhaps one of the best stories that has been told, which is why people are talking about it. If you look at just the way the Bloodline has been told and the detail and discipline that goes in that story, it blows the NWO story out of the water. End quote. The NWO story was like a first chapter, and then a bunch of madness that was just sort of scrawled in a book. There really wasn't a story with the NWO. Rather, there was the beginning of a story, which was just the formation of a group. And that story, I don't know, that's not really right. Like they did the whole, like, you know, Wolfpack and NWO.
Well, I mean, really the
Hollywood stuff.
The primary story of it was the NWO's birth, Sting's alienation from WCW.
Yeah, right.
The NWO's recruitment efforts of Sting, thinking Sting joining NWO would really turn the tide in their favor.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to culminate at
Starrcade,
Starrcade 97, where Sting clearly vanquished Hulk Hogan, Hollywood Hogan, to win the title.
Yeah.
Now, Hogan tried to politic his way into a different finish, but that was kind of the story, that first year of the NWO. And you know, it wasn't always perfect. And of course, they botched the ending because of Hogan. But overall, it was a pretty effective story. Was there a lot of bloat in between those 2 points? Absolutely.
Yeah, there was a ton there, yeah.
And after that moment, after that match, did they seemingly have any idea where they wanted to take the story? Absolutely not.
Yeah, and even the story that they told, because of the basically the botching of the story at Starrcade 97. I mean, that's seen as like an all-time awful, pay-per-view and moment. It sort of tarnished NWO, and you sort of remember more of the NWO for the bloat than you do and the meandering, because they really, they went a million different places, and by the time they got to the finger poke of doom, it was like, this isn't even like, it's not even watchable, like people were just tuning out left and right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, this is not, it's, I would not put the NWO story on my list of like top 10 stories ever told. I hadn't even considered that, to be honest with you. Like, cause we've like polled friendos before. Hey, what do you guys think are some of the best stories? Did we do a community tab? Was that here, or is that
we may have done it somewhere, because that was an idea for a count out, and we still we'll probably do that once this.
Oh yeah, I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
I mean, so far, kind of hopefully this continues. For the most part, the Bloodline story has been, you got really rich, deeply defined characters that not only we as the audience know who they are, all the performers have, like, they know who their characters are.
Yeah.
And play their characters to perfection. And when you have such a rich ensemble of characters to bounce, to use to bounce off each other, and you have, like, Roman's character, the way they've mined his past, the way his face push was an absolute disappointment. The betrayal by Seth when the Shield broke up, like the way they have mined that to such great effect has been really spectacular. This level of wrestling storytelling we don't see very often. And I don't agree with Bischoff on a lot. He's right here, though.
Everything he's saying is right about it, yeah.
Yeah, except about the coming up with the formula. I mean, I think this is a very particular case where you have a character in Roman Reigns who has this history of not getting to where, in kayfabe, he wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
And the heartbreak that he is still dealing with after the Shield broke up.
Mm-hmm.
And he feels like the only people he can trust now are his family.
Mm-hmm.
But the only way he can get his family's loyalty is by manipulating them, you know?
Yeah, right, yeah.
But anyways, that's a very specific case.
Wrestling in general, it's difficult, I would think. And again, we're not, you know, we own Action Coast Wrestling, but we let Magnum take care of a lot of the matches and stuff. Wrestling, by its very nature, is difficult to nail down if you want to tell an ambitious story via formula, because it's not like a traditional, you know, 3-story act or whatever, a 3-act story rather. And in fact, I'm sure a lot of the Bloodline stuff, there has been so much consistently good Bloodline stuff that has led us to this moment. But I don't think for a second back in 2020 when the Tribal Chief debuted, they knew that they were going to get to Sami Zayn being the most popular. They probably had no idea, and if the reports are to be believed, they had no idea Sami Zayn was going to enter into this. And so with wrestling, it seems like it's just a little bit different. And I don't know if when Scott Hall debuted in WCW, if they knew they were going to get to Sting 97 at Starrcade with the Crow, because they didn't know that the Crow was going to take off the way that it did, and the stars were going to line up. So much of pro wrestling seems to be, hey, we did this stuff. It seems to be getting popular. Where do we go from here? Oh, what if there's an injury? Then you have to pivot. What if there's a better idea? Then you pivot. And so with wrestling, it's not like there are probably scripts to a degree involved.
Yeah.
And I use that term loosely, but it's different. So yeah, I don't know, but Bischoff might be talking about formula when it comes to wrestling. I mean, he's been, you know, in the business enough to know that there might be a different idea as to what a formula is, and if that formula is simply come up with a plan and stick to it, that's a pretty decent formula to follow.
Yeah,
you know?
or if the plan is, you know, develop characters that aren't one-dimensional.
Yeah. And honestly, like, so much of what he's talking about is simply Vince McMahon. You know, how many times had we heard, dude, 2 hours before a show, Vince would come in, rip up a script. Yeah. You know, for better or worse, it feels like we're just getting whatever they come up with, you know, well in advance at the beginning of the week or whatever it was, however they work there in WWE. So I found the thread on our community community tab. 26 responses. One person brings up NWO versus Sting within the context of so often storylines are ruined because of the finish. So that one was brought up as potentially a good story, but again, within the context of ruined finishes. But nobody else. There's a lot of Kofi Mania on here. Kofi Mania, you know, say what you will about Vince towards the end there. Vince really did do a good job with Kofi Mania, and his handprints were all over that. His fingerprints were all over that.